I walked into the office. I shared my story after filling out paperwork for 30 minutes and then walking in, and they asked me to tell them it all over again in another 30 minutes, wasting my time, and they're making a lot of money. And then this guy looked at me and my mom and he said, "I think you're just a dramatic teenager." And I like, when I say that out loud, I even get angry and like I get the chills and I want to cry because it was so removed from what I was dealing with. I felt dramatic and I felt emotional and I felt like the world was crumbling down in front of me. And I was a teenager, but that was not what was going on. And all I needed was someone to believe me and help me through my journey, right? And so you have to be an advocate. If you walk into a doctor's office and you don't feel right about this person, listen to yourself, like listen to your body, because your instinct is so much smarter than any education can give you.
Imagine this for a moment, or well, maybe you don't have to imagine this, that you've been told by your doctor you're being too dramatic as you fight for answers. Have you ever been told this? Hey, I'm Tim, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Invisible Condition podcast, where we talk about advocacy and unusually normal things, the conditions, the illnesses, and diseases we live with. Our goal is to end the stigma around invisible conditions by empowering voices, and today's voice is brought to us by Kenzie Vath. Kenzie knows all too well what it's like to be dismissed. After years of struggling to finally get a diagnosis of Lyme disease, she found her voice and turned her suffering into purpose, advocating for others and pushing for breakthrough treatment. Maybe you're feeling lost in your health journey, or maybe you know someone who is. Kenzie and I talk about why it's so important to trust ourselves, connect with others, and to turn our pain into strength. Whether you've had to fight for your health, or maybe you just need a reminder of your resilience, this episode is for you. Have a listen. Kenzie, it's amazing to sit down with you. I know you're a busy person, but before we get into it, for those who are listening, maybe head to the website. There's going to be a little picture of Kenzie's background. It is vibrant, it is pink, and it says happy birthday. So we're recording this a couple days after your birthday, but I love it. It brings such energy to the conversation. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tim. Yes, my background is very extra. I love the color pink. As you can see, my hair's pink. And so they did a full glitter moment for me. So thank you for calling it out.
I love that. As a solopreneur, I gotta, my birthday's not for months, but, my kids decorate my space with a picture or something like that. Not vibrant like that. Maybe I have to put that little plug into them. It's like, hey, 10-year-old and 7-year-old, I need pink streamers in my background.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I think it's good. Make it special. I love it. Hey, before we get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and, you and the condition you live with and, all of that. Let's just get into it.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do a very high level description of who I am, since the podcast, we don't have enough time for that today. I have to be on too many. But high level, in my current season of life, I'm a mom of 3 kids, 5, 3, and 2-year-old. And I work full time, as well as I sit on the board of the Global Lyme Alliance. So I'm a huge advocate for those that suffer with chronic illness and Lyme disease. And it's something that I was diagnosed with at the age of 18. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. I suffered for 10 years before I got my diagnosis, and then another 10 plus years of various treatments to get to a place that I can function where I'm at today. And I would say I'm a very high functioning chronic illness Lyme warrior, and do so many things in the space for Lyme that I'll kind of highlight on as we talk. But yeah, my life is very busy. I love it. I love the plate full. I have a big plate and it's very full. And I love work. I love being dedicated and motivated to make a positive outcome, especially those that are suffering with Lyme.
Well, one thing when we first connected was just, one, your energy. Your energy is just, you exude energy. And I'm already picking that up today. And, I think I'm going on about 4.5 hours sleep. I had a cup of coffee way too late last night. And so, stared at the ceiling for far too long. But your energy, but also, your work aligns with the condition that you live with. And so, you are not just someone who's like, hey, this is the condition I live with, and that's that. It's what made you say, hey, this is the condition I live with. I live with Lyme disease, and now I'm going to go and do something about it.
I think advocacy was definitely a calling in my heart or in my gut. I think when my gut wasn't speaking to me, it was in my heart. And then when my gut started to connect with me, it was on board. It's also part of my healing journey. Even though I'm working through, lifestyle changes and trying to continue to have that energy every day, connecting with people, sharing my story, sharing resources, giving people hope, that is also part of my healing process. So getting connected with the Global Lyme Alliance, ensuring that we are funding the top research to give answers to those that are suffering, especially the generations to come. The research is not going to help, particularly someone like me, who I've already gotten my diagnosis. I've already been in, years of treatments. I'm kind of on like more of the alternative track of treatments right now. But I know for the generations, especially my children, we need better testing for Lyme. We need better treatment options that are direct and don't have negative, effects to the body as well. And we need answers. Really, that's what we need. We need answers. And that's why GLA felt totally aligned with what I wanted, how I wanted to get involved and how I wanted to impact. And one of the best things about getting involved in organizations is you meet amazing people like you, who we are here to facilitate, really, as leaders in the space, to provide hope, to provide information so that other people know where to go and where to start. That's like the hardest part, is like, okay, I got my diagnosis 35 plus doctors later. Now what? Like, there's this relief of that you have an answer or a label for what you're going through, but you have no idea what the next stage is or the next chapter. And those chapters can be rough, So preparing yourself, listening to other people who have gone through it, who have lived through it, who give feedback and advice, I think is critical for that individual who's just recently diagnosed, because now you can kind of guide and listen to your gut or heart, whatever one is better aligned with you at that time. Listen to yourself and figure out what's the best course of action. What are the best decisions for you?
When you said that, just an image popped in my mind of, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease pretty young. And I remember being with my mom, and we're at the hospital, and we got a pamphlet and we're sent home. And here I am, a 16-year-old young guy who just went through surgery, and a surgery that was not related to Crohn's. They thought I had appendicitis, which turned out to not be real. They just took my appendix anyways. And then they decided, oh, I think you've got Crohn's. Here's a pamphlet, and sent me home. And that's it. And now it's like, okay, I've got a diagnosis. Now what? That's almost like just the start of the journey, right? It's, going through all those medical procedures, getting endless scopes, whatever it is that you're going through for your condition. It was almost like the warm up, the pre-stretching before you hike Everest. And now you've got that, you've got that piece of paper, you've got that diagnosis, and now you sit there and go, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And that's just like the importance and the power of community, isn't it? Like to step into that. Was that natural for you to step into that vulnerability and say, hey, I need support?
No, it was not natural. And to be honest, if I rewind the clock from, today, when I was diagnosed, there weren't the resources that there are now. A lot of people were still not talking about Lyme. They weren't sharing their stories. There wasn't a lot of celebrity influence out there to make or to allow progress of change. I still felt very alone. I still felt very much in a silo, very misunderstood, very invisible, ignored, all these things. So I am hopeful for individuals these days who are getting impacted and infected by Lyme, that there are much more resources and much more education around it. Are we where we need to be? Not at all. We have a long way to go. I'll be fully transparent. But I have to say, we are doing a lot better than we used to, right? But than we were. So I think for me, it was natural to share more about my story to truly help others. I'm actually very uncomfortable about sharing my story in the sense of I really hid my symptoms and my issues because I was embarrassed by them. I was misunderstood. I started questioning myself. I thought I was going crazy. So why would I put that out there to other people and have them think I was going crazy, right? Because they already did. Like there were people that already did think I was going crazy. And so I wanted to ensure that no other kid or no other individual had to deal with those symptoms and that doubt, that self-doubt. So that's why I share my story. And I thought it was so important to find results and answers through storytelling that I wrote a book about it called The Ignored Pandemic, Real Stories of Lyme Disease. And I was focused specifically on stories from all different Lyme warriors around the world because this is an international issue. This is not just a New York issue. This is not just a United States issue. This is a world issue that Lyme exists and it's everywhere, really. So that's why it was so important for me to share a more international, global perspective of individuals dealing with and living with this severe disease.
I was doing a bit of research and came across a stat. I think it was 476,000 people in the US alone are diagnosed every single year with Lyme disease. Yeah. And there was a disclaimer behind that said, this number is likely a lot higher because of the misdiagnosis. And I know you've, when we were talking, did our pre-call and get to know each other a little bit, you'd mentioned a number that kind of surprised me, 35. 35 doctors. You had seen so many doctors. And this is starting to become a bit of a theme, is that people are just not giving up and saying, oh, I guess it's a mystery diagnosis, or it's a mystery treatment, or I have a diagnosis, but the treatment's not working. And so this is as good as it gets. 35 doctors. What if somebody's listening today and is thinking, I'm struggling to even go through 2 doctors? What kept you going? And when you hit, like, I don't know, that 20th doctor, were you just like, you know what, enough's enough?
I was. Yeah. I'd have to say 2 things. I mean, I'll give myself a little credit because I showed up and I got in the car, but I'd also say my mom was my advocate and my fighter in the beginning, right? Because she wanted answers and she wasn't going to stop until she got them. So as my caretaker and as the individual who loved me more than anything, she was going to make sure that we figured out what was going on. Because after the acupuncturist to the naturopathic to the, traditional doctor, MD, to some crazy energy Reiki healer, like I did it all. And she's very traditional in sense, but she was like, we're going to figure this out. So she was really the individual who kept me going and believed we were going to get an answer and get results. She had a lot of hope, and I definitely kept going into appointments feeling more hopeless because each appointment took something from me. If it was skewing my story, if it was telling me what's going on, but I knew that really wasn't it, or I believed it, and then I started doing treatments or suggestions from this professional, so to speak, and it wasn't working, or I got worse from it, trying all these crazy diets and bathtubs of supplements. It was just unreal. So she was really the reason I kept going, but I also showed up because there was something in me that just said to not give up. It was like, keep going. And there was days for sure. I was like, I'd rather die than deal with this. I was there. I was at my lowest point. I gave up on life. I gave up on purpose. I didn't have a purpose, which is a huge driving factor for me particularly. And I believe everybody needs to find that purpose to push through. But to not get off topic here, I think it was my mom driving me to those appointments, getting me in the car, and I had to buckle the seatbelt. And I had to buckle the seatbelt and say, okay, let's go. I was a skeptic. I was like, this person isn't going to understand me, or they start talking about some crazy thing that I need to do and take that's going to be painful. And I really don't want to do that. And I'm missing more school and it's causing more problems and all these things. But I showed up and I tried everything at least once. I tried everything at least once. Certain things worked, certain things didn't. And then my diagnosis, funny enough, came like it was a God thing. Like I went to this event with my mom. I never go. It's an adult event, but there was a doctor speaking, and I was really interested in medical stuff because I was trying to self-diagnose and do a lot of, trying to find my answers on my own. And I went, and it was Dr. Dino Pratt. I'll never forget it, who runs the Invita Medical Center. And he started talking about Lyme disease. And my mom and I looked at each other in the middle of this education, session. And I was completely white, full of tears. She was like overwhelmed. And I'm like, Mom, this is what I have. And she's like, I know. And like, we just went up to him immediately. We're like, we have to come get tested, da, da, da. So it was like, I almost diagnosed myself of like, this is it. This is what I have. I can list and I can check a box on every single one of these symptoms, and it makes so much sense. And then once I went through the formal testing, they took urine, blood, hair, everything. And they're like, yep, you're positive for Lyme and, 7 co-infections and you have XYZ going on. I mean, this was almost 20 years ago now, a little less than 20 years, but yeah, it was a shock. And then there was this relief. Like I said, there was just like relief. I have an answer. I have a label. I'm not crazy. Like there is so much to the mental health piece that getting a label for your symptoms or an identity for your symptoms gives you like this relief of like, okay, it's not me. Like I can now do something with this. Right. So yeah, it takes a combination of having your caretaker, your advocate, and yourself to push through. And you have to fight for answers. And there is an answer for everybody out there.
Oh, wow. I've just got kind of goosebumps listening to your story, right from you're sitting there, you said it's like, it's a God thing. I was sitting there, shouldn't have been there, heard this and went check, check, check. And then went, okay, I have an answer now. It reminds me of a story I recently heard as well, where somebody kept saying they went to doctor after doctor after doctor. And it said, no, it's not that. It's not that. It's not that. And he's like, it is this. And finally found a doctor to listen to him. He was like, yep, you've got this. Let's get you into the treatment. And now he's like feeling on fire for life. And so it takes an incredible amount of energy. And, you also said something that kind of really piqued my interest, is finding your purpose. And I know, I think you said, it's like not to go off topic, but I feel like this is directly on topic, because a lot of the work that I've been doing, a lot of the research, how do we advocate for ourselves? It's got to start from within. Why is this important to me? What's driving me? And finding that purpose, it builds that foundation, doesn't it?
100%. I think purpose is something that when you're sick and you're battling with an illness, you lose a piece of yourself, of that driving force and understanding of want, because you have to focus on this thing that you weren't expecting, right? Like myself, like I wasn't expecting to have to take care of myself in my teenage years or my 20s, right? I was like, I could abuse my body and, keep going and do all these fun things. And that just wasn't my path, right? And thank God, honestly, looking back, thank God it wasn't my path, because I'm such a stronger person today because I had this experience, and I took this experience and had to find the silver lining of it, and then identify what is now my purpose within this experience. And for me, it was doing something with it. like, I have this experience. I've gone through this chronic illness. I lost the majority of my childhood and teen years and young adulthood. Now what am I going to do with it? Because I can sit and sulk on it and be depressed and upset. And there are times that's true. Like, I get upset. I'm like, I didn't get to go off to college and have a normal life, or I didn't get to do this. But at the same time, it's like so superficial. I'm like, but I know what true joy is, and I know how to take care of my body and read the back of a label and put healthy things into my body and take care of like all these essential things that now in my 30s and above, like, I have to care about. But most of the, younger generation didn't think about it that way. And I did. I had a expedited, education to self-care. So I'm very good about that right now. So I can even do more. I have my big plate and it's very full. The reason is because at a young age, I learned how to care for myself to ensure I could do 100 times plus when I'm feeling great. And now I'm doing it. But to your point, that purpose, you have to find it within yourself and within your suffering. And so through the Lyme process, when I was going through that deepest suffering, and I always asked, why me? Like, why do I have to go through this? I realized I did it because I had to help someone else go through their suffering and come out on the other side. And I was flooded with people. Once my parents started actually sharing, like, oh yeah, our daughter, because they'd always say, oh, how's Kenzie? Because I was always the sick kid. And they're like, actually, she has Lyme disease. She's battling with this and da 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 da. They were like, wait, what? I know somebody with Lyme, or I have a family member with Lyme, or, oh my gosh, my daughter's been dealing with this, and I need her to talk to your daughter, or my son who's, 15, he won't get out of his room, and he's like, struggling at school and da 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 da. What can your daughter talk to him and give him hope, like that he can work through this? And I became, their someone they could relate to, and so that became a really driving force and a purpose for me to show up for other people and give them hope to push through, and that they had a purpose and a reason. And now writing this book, being involved with GLA, doing advocacy work for the Lyme community, actively donating time and dollars into it, that has given me a bigger purpose that I would have never done if I didn't have to go through the suffering with Lyme and come out to this place of like true joy. So I would say it's a blessing, an unfortunate blessing, but a blessing in itself.
I was sharing with somebody just this weekend that invisible condition wouldn't have even existed if I wasn't so sick and too sick for surgery. If I didn't, if my Crohn's didn't come out of remission when it did, at the same time a job ended, this just wouldn't exist in this form. And so, there's things that happen in our life, whether it's, we look back and go, okay, that's a strange coincidence, or how did that happen? And you find that purpose. And maybe somebody's listening to this and it's like, you're struggling to figure out that purpose, reach out, like let's have a conversation about it with myself, with Kenzie, with someone that you trust, and understand, not everyone who's listening might be like, I need to get on a podcast and tell my story. Maybe your purpose is just to be okay with your diagnosis. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's to just find your joy, whatever that is, that acceptance. I think that's, we went way off script there, but I think it's an important conversation. And I know as somebody like yourself diagnosed with Lyme and having to go through that journey, right? Because it's, you said it's like, there's days when it's just easy to give up, isn't there?
Yes. And I'm so glad you did a shout out of like, or a comment regarding sometimes maybe the purpose is just accepting. I think you're so right. I went above and beyond to try to find reasoning behind my suffering, but also one of the most simple things in the midst of suffering when you're dealing with any illness, because people will go through bouts of illness in their life, is compassion. Having compassion for other people. Through suffering, you experience that other people are struggling too. So having compassion when people struggle, giving people grace, being more, just loving and accepting. If someone cuts you off in your car that morning and you just get really pissed off, maybe they're like rushing to the hospital for something, or maybe they are having, an emergency that they have to attend to. You never know. So it's given me a lot of compassion. And I think that's allowed me to feel more settled in my purpose too, of being like, I'm a very impatient person. Fun fact, I'm super impatient and I'm always going, going, going. So when I was ill and I didn't have the ability to go, go, go and do all these things, and it pushed me back, it was also perspective of like, oh, okay. So I want this, but I can't have this. So I have to accept this. And then I also have to realize there's other people dealing with this too and feeling this discomfort. So I'm going to have compassion and understanding for them. And once I started doing that and letting go of the frustration that I couldn't be performing at my highest self, I started to heal too. So there's a lot of mental healing through that too. And that also solidified more of my purpose in life and allowed me to exceed and get to my level that I wanted to perform at. So I know that's like very like ethereal thinking, but that's kind of where I was at. I was like, big picture, what do I need to do and how do I get there to be my best self?
Well, I think it's a terrific lead in just to a bigger conversation or a bigger question, even really about one of the purposes of Invisible Condition is around self-advocacy, right? Your story is about self-advocacy. Finding your purpose is about self-advocacy. 35 plus doctors, preparing for that right treatment, because I know that's something that you're passionate about. When you've got to prepare, not just physically, but mentally.
Yes.
When we think of self-advocacy, like what comes to mind? What is that one thing that comes to top of your mind?
The first thought I had when you asked the question was being an advocate at the doctor's office. Like, I can't tell you how many times a physician said something to me that was completely inappropriate to say to someone that was suffering, and they didn't have compassion, not all of them, just a handful that I remember. And of course you remember the worst ones. You don't remember the people that were nice and got you to the next step, in the journey. You always remember the people that tell you, like, I'll never forget. I walked into the office. I shared my story after filling out paperwork for 30 minutes and then walking in, and they asked me to tell them it all over again in another 30 minutes, wasting my time, and they're making a lot of money. And then this guy looked at me and my mom and he said, "I think you're just a dramatic teenager." And I like, when I say that out loud, I even get angry and like I get the chills and I want to cry because it was so removed from what I was dealing with. I felt dramatic and I felt emotional and I felt like the world was crumbling down in front of me. And I was a teenager, but that was not what was going on. And all I needed was someone to believe me and help me through my journey, right? And so you have to be an advocate. If you walk into a doctor's office and you don't feel right about this person, listen to yourself, like listen to your body, because your instinct is so much smarter than any education can give you. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I should have said that probably a handful of times, and spending $450 at this appointment and $560 at this appointment and $1,000 at this appointment and $2,000 of blood work later and $100,000 of supplements and treatments and everything else later. Like, I mean, I call myself the $1 million baby, but the truth is you have to know if this person's going to be aligned with you. And if they are, then you will get there together, but you have to make sure you're signed up to make that change. And you need to make sure they have your best interest in mind to get to your next step. If they don't, and you don't feel right about it, or you don't feel a treatment's going to serve you, then listen to your gut and don't do it. That is the hardest thing to do and the biggest step forward to self-advocacy.
It's incredibly hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's you're there sitting with an expert, and something's not quite right, and it's hard maybe to disagree or to challenge that. And a guest, a podcaster I released recently, her name is Jess. She's a founder of an amazing health AI startup called Turn2.ai, and she put out a little clip a while ago, and it talks about it's okay to be wrong. She's a caregiver herself. Her son has cerebral palsy. He came home from the hospital and something wasn't right. She went to 4 different emergency rooms and they all said everything's fine. She said nothing. Something is wrong. She found another hospital that was open, 45-minute drive, and turned out, about an hour after she got there, her son went into shock and could have died. Mm-hmm. So she knew, right? You know if there's something wrong. Another story, a quick story here is I know someone who when you said dramatic teenager, they took their son to the hospital and he was diagnosed with anxiety. Well, long story short, the dad pushed to say, hey, how can we rule everything out? So they did a test. A week later, he had a life-saving brain surgery. Yeah. It's, and I know those are very dramatic stories, but you know best for yourself and for those around you.
Yes. And you said, like, you step into this doctor's office, and they're expert, but they are not an expert in you. Only you are the expert in yourself. And so getting very in tune and listening to your body and your signals. And I mean, all the way down to when you eat something or drink something, you should know if it's good for yourself, like good for your body. Is it serving you? The people around you, the clutter in your house, the house you live in, all these things you have an energy force against, and not in a woo-woo way, but like legitimately we are energy beings. So you should feel if something is drawing you towards it or pushing you away from it, and getting very in tune with that is going to help save your life, to your point, through those beautiful, beautiful stories, because it's so true. And there's hundreds of thousands of those stories that the mom or the dad or, the individual knew instinctually. They weren't educated about what was going on, but they knew something was wrong and they need to get a response and act quickly. That's very critical to self-advocacy. And I love that. I think that's the most powerful and beautiful thing that you can have, is just understanding your body and listening to it.
Yeah, we have to, right? Whether you are a healthy individual, and we all have different definitions of healthy because we're not the same. My normal is different than your normal, and it's different than all of our listeners. And so, it's understanding how our body works, what triggers things, what sets us off, whether it's a physical, something that triggers us physically or even mentally or emotionally, and tuning into that. And we don't talk about it enough. You've got young kids, I've got young kids, and it's like, I can tell if they've eaten way too much of something. We don't, our kids, like we really control their sugar intake and their artificial stuff, and, pretty natural food, but I can tell if they've overloaded on something. And so we talk about it, but I don't think we talk about it enough. And not to say that, hey, this is a diet show and this is what you need to eat, but there's just something to say about, watching what goes into our bodies, because we are what we eat. I mean, I didn't make that up. That's just an age-old saying.
Well, and it's interesting, like going off on the eating topic, I'm the exact same, by the way. I can completely tell if my child had like red dye, and I'm like, you're bananas. Like, there is something wrong with you. But I mean, in the Lyme community, the chronic illness community, we know sugar is a huge inflammatory issue, right? It's the most popular drug on the market. I love sugar. I'll say it. I eat it. I love it. But I know what's going to happen when I eat it, and I know how it messes with my body, and my pain ignites. It's like adding fuel to the fire, and my back pain flares up, my joint pain flares up, I get really stiff, I struggle. So I know that when I make that choice, it's going to be a bad one physically, even though it's a dash satisfying mentally. I have to be very careful with it. Right? So getting in tune and understanding the decisions you're going to make are going to be good or bad, but knowing what it's going to happen when you make those decisions is key. And I think we do need to talk about it more, even as adults. I think we feel that, everybody everybody's eating sugar, or everybody's drinking, or everybody's doing this. And the truth is that's not at all the case. Like most of what you see on Instagram, about 99% of Instagram is like fake. Like nobody's doing any of that. That's like a digital backdrop or AI, like, you know what I mean? Like, or they prep this beautiful banana bread every day and all these beautiful things and they don't eat any of it. There's no way, maybe some people and you're the lucky ones. But my point is, the truth is everything has to be moderation. You have to get really in tune with yourself. I even talk to my kids, like if you have kids out there, talk to your kids about how you feel. Like what are their emotions and responses tied to food? Because food also can numb the connection with yourself, right? So even when I eat sugar, it's a false sense of happiness that I'm like, oh, this tastes so good. I love it, blah, blah, blah. And then my body catches up and is like, no, I hate this. This is slowly killing me. So it's really being aware that what you put in your body is really setting you up for the next 24 to 48 hours and how you show up mentally, how you show up physically, and how you show up for yourself. And I think talking about it is huge. I talk to my kids. I make them talk about their emotions and their feelings and their body parts and all the things because I want them to be extremely self-aware about what's going on so that they can make better choices in the future as they get older.
Yeah, I'm feeling some self-imposed guilt because my wife made brownies last night and they're up on the counter and I just want to eat all of them.
I know.
And I may have snuck one for breakfast this morning while my kids weren't watching. And but I know you're absolutely right. I know it's going to have an impact on me. I know what it's going to cause. And it's like you got to make that decision, and it might feel right in the moment, but a couple hours to a couple days later, it's not going to be good. But I want to pivot a little bit because I know you said this at the beginning and about your book. And I know you said you're going to rewrite it or writing another one. So let's talk about this, the ignored pandemic. So you wanted to tell stories. And I know we're taking a big pivot away from food, but I think it's really important to talk about this.
I am a creative person. I love originality. And when I was diagnosed and started going through my treatment process, as I mentioned, I was bombarded by people asking me questions, thinking they had Lyme too or other chronic illness or dealing with all these things. I got highly educated in the Lyme space and nutrition, and got my bachelor's in holistic medicine, yoga certified, was a health coach. I mean, I did it all. So I was helping people. But one of the things that was missing was a resource. I didn't have a good holistic resource that I could give people and say, here, learn about it, understand it, find someone you can relate to in it, and let's start this journey, right? Because those were the things I wanted when I was going through my journey. So through my creativity, I decided I was going to write a book and create a resource. So I was checking these two boxes. So this book, as much as it was treacherous for me, it was the most amazing thing I created as a resource. And I do it basic. I did not do this. I don't make any money off this. This is a hobby because I give them away like candy. Talk about like, oh, are you struggling? Here, take my book, start reading it. And what it is the first part of the book is all Lyme 101. It's get to know Lyme disease if you don't know what it is, or you're recently diagnosed, or you know somebody with Lyme. Because it's also for the caretaker. It's not just for the patient, but for the caretaker. So through the first part of the book, Lyme basics, get to know what it is, what different treatments are out there for it, and some alternative methods as well. I cover a lot of it. And then I go into the storytelling. And I had interviews with people from all over the world, Germany, India, Ireland, Canada, you name it, and the US. And I wanted to tell other people's stories through interview style, so very digestible, and what they were going through. Because one of the disconnects when I was suffering was I couldn't relate to anybody. I thought I was going through this alone. And I want to show people that you are not going through this alone. Wherever you are in the world, there is someone else, probably within unless you're really out in the middle of nowhere, probably within a 3-mile radius that is going through this with you. And that's close, right? That's like crazy. So the second part's all these amazing people's stories. And I wish I could have added more. And I can't tell you how awkward it was to reach out to people on Instagram and be like, I'm writing a book. Would you share your story? And they're like, are you spam? And I'm like, no, I'm a real person. So that was a funny journey or connection. Then the last piece, I have like Lyme disease FAQs and resources, which my second version, I'd love to enhance the resources because I've learned so much just within publishing this book. And then I did something that no one else, at least I don't know. This came to me independently, and I don't know anyone else has done this, but I actually added QR codes on here. 1, to include your story on the GLA website. And 2, I asked every person I interviewed what their favorite song was that helped them get through their journey. And I created a playlist on Spotify. So you can listen to the Lyme Warrior playlist with a collection of amazing songs, all very different, but inspired someone to keep going through the hardest times. So I love that because I think music is part of our healing journey as well. And then I left some pages, open pages for note taking. If you go to the doctor's office and you want to jot down some notes or follow up on something, that's a good spot for the caretaker too. So this is a beautiful creation of stories, information, and a beautiful resource for someone who may be struggling with Lyme disease and chronic illness that I had a great time putting together. So yeah, that's a little bit about it.
What an amazing project. I'm going to have to hit you up at some point because I'm partway through a book. I've got, I think, 3 drafts of very different topics, but there's one I'm really honing in on. And I love the idea of inviting stories in. And because, as you know, I'm a storyteller. I love story. I love interviewing because I think that's how we end the stigma of the conditions we live with, right?
Yes.
Lyme disease, there's a lot of stigma that surrounds Lyme disease. It's, you're just lazy, or you're tired, or you're always sick, or, just all those negative words that come in. And the way we end that stigma is through story.
I love that. And it's through vulnerability. It's getting real with people. It's connecting on a different level than just a superficial one. And when you're raw and real, you actually build trust and connection. And then you become your true self. You morph into the true self that you are. And through that storytelling, you build that trust. And so I think it's a beautiful thing. I think we need to have more vulnerability, trust in this world more now than ever. So I think it's something we all need to do.
I was just the weekend just before recording this, was listening to someone speak, and he said, the panelist, the host of the panel, kind of put this person on the spot. This person lives with bipolar, and he asked, what's one thing that you wish we could educate each other on, or what's one thing that you just wish that people would be more open to? And he said, I hate the phrase, "How are you?" because I want to be real, but I don't know if they want to hear it. So I just don't even answer that question anymore. And so for those who are listening and are saying, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" Good. Just pause. Are you really good? Do you maybe it's not a time to get vulnerable? But I love that you said that, Kenzie, is be vulnerable, be real. That's how we connect. That's how we share. That's how we grow and learn. And so, as we wrap up, I'm sure people are going to want to know, how do I get a hold of Kenzie? How do I find her book? How do I learn more? How can people reach you?
My Instagram is Holistic Umbrella. I also have a website, holisticumbrella.com. And then my book is on Amazon, The Ignored Pandemic, Real Stories of Lyme Disease. Author Kenzie Vath, that's with a V. And please reach out to me if you have questions. I talk a little bit about some non-traditional treatments that I do for my Lyme or my pain or other, symptoms that I deal with. And I'd love to, get your story and get to know you and get vulnerable and build trust and build this community around Lyme disease and Lyme awareness and the chronically ill. I think we have some amazing, amazing things coming in the future for all of us. So thank you for having me, Tim, and allowing me to share a little bit about the work we're doing.
I love it. And for those who are listening, don't worry, I'll have the links in the show notes. And, I'm excited to get my hands on a copy of the book as well. And,
Yes.
I've met more and more people now. And you said 3 miles. I'm in Canada, kilometers. So like within 3 kilometers, I know about half a dozen people with Lyme disease. And so I'm excited to just continue that conversation with them as well as yourself. And so for those who are listening, maybe you're struggling to tell your story. Maybe you're not sure how to advocate for yourself. Head to invisiblecondition.com. I've got a whole series on it, how to advocate for yourself. I've got, 7 steps, and it's not just 7 steps. It could be for you 20 steps, it could be 1 step, but it starts with finding that purpose. And I'm putting together a downloadable piece of content for you just to even how to unpack your purpose and your values to get started on that journey. So stay tuned for that. And if you love what you hear, the way we grow this podcast is just tell your friends and your family. We get more subscribers, get more people onto the podcast, because we will end the stigma by telling stories like Kenzie's. And one last thing, if you have the means, I would love, if you can, maybe a donation. That's every donation that comes in just goes into the publication and goes into producing these episodes. I don't make, as Kenzie said, I don't make any money on this. This is a hobby for me, but it's an important one. So with that, I just hope everyone has an amazing day. And Kenzie, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Joe.